All right, good afternoon, everybody. As promised, it is 2:03, so we will get started. My name is Isaac Reichman. I'm the Director of Public Information at the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. Today's webinar is Navigating Chicago's latest COVID-19 regulations, specifically the bridge phase that we just entered today. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. I know for many of you, this is not your first webinar, so I apologize. A big portion of today's webinar will be answering questions. I'll answer those questions to the best of my ability. Please use the chat function if you have any questions. I'm just going to type into that right now. Again, please use the chat. That's the best way for you to submit questions and for me to see them as they're coming in. If I don't get to your question, or I need to consult with some colleagues, or perhaps you have a question that you would like to send separately than this webinar for whatever reason, you can send those to our general outreach email. That's bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Again, bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. You'll see that on the bottom of every page. I also just sent it into the chat so you see it. So I'm going to do my best to kind of answer questions periodically over the course of the webinar. Also make sure to have time at the end of this for questions. This webinar is also being recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/ChicagoBACP. Again, youtube.com/ChicagoBACP. So if you missed any points or have any colleagues that would like to watch, you can do that. We're also going to be having another one of these webinars on Monday at 1 p.m. for anybody that is unable to attend this one or has any additional questions. Great, so we will get started, and I know that folks have a lot of questions. I promise I'll cover a lot of those pretty quickly, but I'll provide an update soon to all those questions. First, I want to frame this entire conversation and where we are at with the COVID numbers. Just 2 days ago, we went below 400 cases per day. Got down to the moderate risk level for the first time over the last month and a half or so. It's a really good sign. We're in lower risk when it comes to test positivity rate. The important thing is not only are our numbers down, they're consistently going down. So all of our metrics are either stable or, for the most part, declining over the last full month now it's been. I mean, that's a really good sign, and that's why we're able to move to the bridge phase, which I'll talk about today. But I want to make clear from this information, COVID is still here. There's been a lot of great news, a lot of great announcements recently, but COVID is absolutely still here. We need everyone to get vaccinated. The vaccine is widely available. Best way for these numbers to keep going down is for folks to get vaccinated. So if you haven't, if your employees haven't, we don't want all this positive news to be a sign that it's over. We want folks to keep moving forward so we can keep moving forward. So because of this, yesterday we entered the Chicago bridge phase due to after 2 weeks of stable or declining metrics since we last changed. In this phase, capacity regulations have increased broadly across all industries, and we've expanded the vaccine exemption to allow vaccinated individuals to be exempt from capacity limits across industries. An important note, and I see a lot of questions coming in related to this. We know, obviously, there was a big announcement from the CDC yesterday. We are working with the state to review our regulations following that announcement. We expect that we will broadly follow the new CDC guidance across most settings, and following, again, the CDC's announcement, we will be releasing updated guidelines in the coming days to align with broadly with what the CDC said. With that in mind, however, the phase 4 regulations that I'm going to be reviewing over the course of this presentation still remain in place. Again, we are reviewing our regulations following that announcement. We expect to make changes, and we will communicate those changes as soon as they're made. But for now, all of the bridge phase regulations that we're going to review remains in place. That means still maintaining 6 feet of social distancing and still wearing masks. So again, we are looking at regulations and we expect them to change in the coming days. But for now, those changes have not yet been made. So mask requirements, social distancing requirements, whether vaccinated or not, remain in place. Nothing is changing when it comes to masks or social distancing at this time. I want to be very, very clear about that. Again, we are reviewing them. We expect to make changes, but those changes have not been made at this point. So what is the bridge phase and where are we at right now? First, I want to talk about the vaccine exemption, which now applies across industries. There are three main points of this vaccine exemption. And let me be very, very clear that businesses have the option of taking advantage of this. It is absolutely not a requirement for businesses to check vaccine cards if they don't want to. They do not need to take advantage of this vaccine exemption if they do not want to. But businesses that choose to do so can check for vaccine cards, and they can have fully vaccinated individuals not count towards COVID-19 capacity limits across all industries. Any industry does not need to count COVID-19, does not need to count fully vaccinated individuals towards COVID-19 limits. 6 feet of social distancing still is a requirement, and mask rules remain in place. That's the first part of the vaccine exemption. The second is that bars, restaurants, or other establishments that allow for on-site consumption of food or alcohol, you can increase your table or party size above the limit of 10 if everybody at that table that is 16 or older is fully vaccinated. Again, you can increase table or party size if everybody at that table is fully vaccinated. Finally, establishments that have a late hour liquor license can operate without hour restrictions till 4 a.m. most days and 5 a.m. Saturday nights if they only have fully vaccinated patrons that are allowed to enter. That's the overview of the vaccine exemption. I'm going to get into it in a little bit more detail. But again, this is an option for establishments that wish to take advantage of it. It is not a requirement that businesses take advantage of this. So, quick overview of where we're at with the Chicago Bridge phase. You'll see all the changes that come into effect for capacity limits here in red that come into effect today. You'll notice an asterisk under each one that allows folks to take advantage of the vaccine exemption and either increase capacity or increase party or table size. And again, I'm going to go over the vaccine exemption in more detail when I'm done with here. So first, bars and restaurants. Indoor table service can now operate at 75% capacity, while outdoor service is permitted without capacity restrictions. Also, for the first time, indoor or outdoor standing areas can open at 25% capacity. So we've always had the rules that folks need to be seated whenever eating or drinking. You can now open standing areas for the first time, but they're limited to 25% capacity. You can have 10 people per indoor or outdoor table or within a party that's standing, and you can have 6 people per party for folks that are sitting at the bar or counter. Again, you can go above that 10 or above that 6 only if everybody within that table is fully vaccinated, everybody over the age of 16. Establishments must follow normal or can now follow normal liquor license hours. That means places can stay open till 2 a.m. Most nights and 3 o'clock a.m. on Saturday nights. Tables or standing parties still must be spaced so that patrons are 6 feet apart from patrons at other tables. And again, the mask requirements remain in place at this time, even for folks that are fully vaccinated. We're looking at our regulations, and we will be providing an update in the next few days. But at this point, mask requirements still remain in place. For social events, indoor events are now capped at 250 people, and outdoor events are capped at 500 people. All those food service and bars regulations that I just reviewed still must be followed. Again, I see a lot of questions coming in. I promise I will get to those. I want to provide an overview of all the industry guidelines first. So for social events, you can go up to 250 people indoors, up to 500 people outdoors. However, you still must have no more than 10 per table, and you still must have tables spaced so that patrons are 6 feet apart. For commercial and residential buildings or for hotels, limited to 60% capacity in your typical spaces. If you're doing anything, though, that falls under one of the other guidelines, you must follow those regulations. So restaurants must follow the food service and bars regulations. Events must follow the events regulations. Meetings must follow meetings, etc., right there. So for recreation, limited to no more than 50% or 100 people indoors. Outdoors, max groups of 100 people. You can have multiple groups. Meetings, conferences, and conventions, they're limited to the lesser of 60% or 1,000 people. Additionally, some smaller venues can opt to follow the social event capacity limits instead, if they want to cap their event at 250 people without that 60% capacity limit. Museums are 60% capacity indoors or outdoors, with guided tours limited to 50 people. Personal services, retail stores are at 60% capacity. Performance venues and movie theaters, ticketed spectator events, places like that are now at a full 60% capacity. Health and fitness centers are also at 60% capacity with no more than 50 people in an indoor class and 100 people in an outdoor class. We're aligning with the state when it comes to festivals and general admission outdoor events. That's 30 people per 1,000 square feet. For fleas and farmers markets, it's 15 per 1,000 square feet and 30 per 1,000 square feet outdoors. Places of worship, indoor venues are now limited to 60% capacity. Again, when it comes to all of these capacity regulations, you still need to maintain 6 feet of social distancing between parties. That's still a requirement across the board, even if folks are fully vaccinated. That's a quick overview of all of the industry regulations in all of the capacity limits. Now I'm going to talk a little bit, because I see a lot of questions about how this relates to asking for, to checking folks that are fully vaccinated. So I'm going to talk about the vaccine exemption before opening it up to questions as they're coming in. So again, the vaccine exemption is an option for businesses that want to take advantage of it. Businesses have the option of choosing to take advantage of the vaccine exemption. And that means that fully vaccinated individuals do not count towards the COVID capacity limits if a business chooses to opt into this. Additionally, as I said, table size can increase above the limit of 10 if all patrons that are 16 or older in that table are fully vaccinated. Now, if you want to have a table that's less than 10, obviously you can have folks that are fully vaccinated and not vaccinated at the same table. It just can't go above 10. Finally, late hour establishments can operate without hour restrictions, but only if fully vaccinated patrons are allowed to enter. Fully vaccinated patrons only for late hour establishments, places that stay open till 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. As a reminder, I want to reiterate this because I know there's a lot of confusion following the CDC's announcement yesterday. Fully vaccinated individuals still need to wear face coverings, except in the same limited circumstances that have always been in place, such as when they're eating or drinking, and you still need to have 6 feet of social distancing. This has not changed. Again, we're reviewing the regulations, we're working with the state, and we do expect to release updated regulations soon, but they have not yet been released at this point. So this is still the rule as of now. So a little bit more about the vaccine exemption. What does fully vaccinated mean? Fully vaccinated means 14 days after the final dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. That means your first shot of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, because that's just one dose, or after your second shot of the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine. There's also other vaccines in case you have folks from other countries that would qualify. A full list of those can be found on the reopening website. And I should have typed this into the chat earlier. That's chicago.gov/reopening. You can find a whole FAQ on the vaccine exemption there, in addition to more information about these guidelines. So businesses, again, I want to be very clear, you are not required to take advantage of the vaccine exemption. If you choose not to, you simply must follow all of those Chicago bridge phase regulations that I just reviewed. However, if you do choose to take part in the vaccine exemption, businesses are responsible for verifying that patrons are fully vaccinated. That means checking for a vaccination card, or it doesn't need to be the original of the card. It can be a photo or a photocopy of the vaccination card. That, again, just a picture of the card on your phone would suffice. Additionally, some folks have a printout or a photo or some sort of electronic proof of vaccine records, provided that it at least has the patron's name on it. So it is your responsibility as a business to verify that patrons are fully vaccinated by checking for their vaccine records. You're then expected to track which customers are under the vaccine exemption during their time in the establishment. You are not required or expected in any way to keep a copy of that vaccine card or whatever it is you looked at to check for vaccination. We really don't recommend that you keep a copy of that. You're just required to check it and then track which customers in your establishment are under the vaccine exemption while they're in your establishment. This can take a variety of different forms. A log, you can use some log where you have their name, but that's not a requirement. The requirement is simply that establishments know who is and who isn't taking part in the vaccine exemption, and making that information available to a investigator upon request. So examples of this, it can be as simple as, and I know this is hopefully pretty easy to operationalize for some bars and restaurants, can be as simple as a wristband or a stamp when someone comes in. It can be as simple as, let's say you have a seating chart that you keep at the front of your establishment where you are marking who is sitting where that is taking advantage of the vaccine exemption. Basically, at a really, really simple level, if our investigators were to arrive at your establishment, we see 15 people sitting at a table, you need to tell us and you need to make it clear to us that you have checked and that those folks are vaccinated. Again, maybe they just have a wristband, maybe you're not letting, maybe they have a stamp, maybe you just have a checkbox as you walk in, but you as an establishment needs to know who's taking advantage under the vaccine exemption. Additionally, customers should be prepared to show proof of vaccination that matches the information tracked by the establishment. So if you give someone a wristband to show that they're vaccinated, then customers should be prepared to show some sort of proof of vaccination that matches that information. So who's responsible? If an establishment is licensed by BACP, as it is with all of these COVID regulations, ultimately it is the licensed entity that is responsible for verifying vaccinations. Now, you don't need to be the one who's actually doing the checking. You can delegate that to someone else, an event organizer, for example. But ultimately, it's the licensed entity that would be held responsible. So it's your responsibility for doing this verification. If an establishment is not licensed by BACP, for example, an office building or a place of worship or some sort of event venues or other establishments that don't require it, you need to have some sort of designee that is on site, that is designated by the building owner or the leaseholder in some way that is now responsible. Again, I see a lot of questions come in. I want to review in more detail for bars and restaurants real quick to make sure that we are that kind of covering everything before opening up to questions, because I think some of these do need to be double checked or reviewed. So quick overview of where we're at with bars or restaurants. Again, we're at 75% capacity for tables. Standing areas can operate at 25%. 10 people per table or standing party, either indoors or outdoors. Food must be available at all times. Bar seating is allowed as long as you have 6 feet of social distancing between parties and no more than 6 people per party. Outdoor service is absolutely and will continue to be preferred. There's no capacity limit for outdoors, provided that tables are spaced so that patrons are 6 feet apart. This includes, sidewalk cafes, outdoor patios, expanded outdoor dining areas, rooftops, retractable roofs, outdoor tents that are at least 50% open, igloos, though we're seeing less of those obviously as the weather gets nicer, and then also indoor spaces where 50% of that are within 8 feet of a wall that is at least 50% open. Face coverings still, I've said it and I'll say it again, still at this time, face coverings are required in all indoor or outdoor public settings, except when actively eating or drinking. And I apologize, there is a typo on this slide. Folks are allowed to be standing while they're eating or drinking now around standing areas. So this should say, except when actively eating or drinking. I apologize, that should not say seated there. Tables or standing parties must be spaced so that patrons are 6 feet apart. Additionally, standing tables per state guidelines for this must be placed around tables or the bar. So you cannot just have a standing area where everybody's mingling. You need to have parties placed around tables or placed by the bar. Events can occur. They must follow the indoor dining regulations. And reservations or the 2-hour time limit is encouraged but not required. And again, regular operating hours can resume. So that's for standard liquor licensees, that's until 2 a.m. Monday through Friday mornings, and until 3 a.m. on Sunday mornings, Saturday night. Finally, when we want to provide an overview of what the vaccine exemption means for bars and restaurants. Capacity can increase, so you're limited to 75% at table areas and 25% at standing areas. Capacity can increase above those for because all patrons that are fully vaccinated do not count towards those capacity limits. Face coverings, though, you still need to have 6 feet between patrons, and you still need to have face coverings except when actively eating or drinking. Again, table or party size at a bar or restaurant can increase above the limit of 10 if all patrons that are 16 or older at that table are fully vaccinated. And then finally, late hour establishments can operate only with fully vaccinated patrons. Great, so I'm gonna take time. I know a lot of questions came in. I know I answered a lot of those questions, but I'm gonna take a couple minutes to go through questions as best as I can. Again, some of this is a new thing for us, this expansion of the vaccine exemption. So it may be that I'm unable to answer every question right now. If that is the case, I'll ask that you please send those to our BACP outreach email, and we'll get you answers as soon as possible. We want to make it really, really clear, though, the reason for this vaccine exemption is that patrons that are, when folks are fully vaccinated, that's how we can really get back to normal. And all the capacity limits, everything like that, they're not, if folks are fully vaccinated, we can go above those. And that's really the important thing we're trying to stress here. But I do want to make it very, very clear. We know that most businesses won't use this, but we want to give an option for businesses if they want to increase capacity. So first question, do tables still need to be 6 feet apart inside and outside? Yes, still the case, even with the CDC's announcement. You still need to have masks. You still need to have table space so that patrons are 6 feet apart. Again, I've said it before, we expect that this may change, but at this point, we still require masks and 6 feet of social distancing, even for vaccinated customers. So questions specifically about wedding guests. questions about sitting more than 10 per table. So again, and having a full cocktail hour, you can sit more than 10 people per table if all the patrons are fully vaccinated and you're checking that. And you can have a full capacity cocktail hour, again, if because patrons that are fully vaccinated do not count towards capacity limits. At this point, we are still following state guidelines regarding dance floors. According to the state at this point, dance floors are still to be closed, even if patrons are fully vaccinated. We can never be less strict than the state, and that's something that the state has in place. Great, couple questions here, just saying, is it still 6 per table? It is. We're now up to 10 people per table, as you know. Masks are still required. We anticipate that that might change, but at this point, masks are still required. Yep. Great. Great question. Are patrons in standing areas allowed to come to the bar to order drinks? We still, the regulation about ordering from the bars remain in place even as standing areas open. That means you can only go and order from the bar if there aren't folks sitting at the bar. We don't want, the big thing is we don't want parties within 6 feet of each other, patrons within 6 feet of patrons from other parties. So if you don't have seating at the bar, or if you have seating that is 6 feet away from the place where you go order, then you can order from the bar. If not, then you cannot order from the bar. Questions about kind of how this dance, we're still not allowed to have dance floors open. Again, standing areas, folks do need to be standing and placed around tables with those patrons 6 feet apart from other patrons, and you're limited to 25% capacity at this point. And just to clarify around standing areas, you can have folks placed in standing areas. You can have them standing at the bar, again, provided that anytime anyone is kind of at the bar, you have no more than 6 people per party, and you're 6 feet from other parties. So you can have standing areas at the bar, provided, again, that you're under 25% capacity within that area. Here, if you have a party of 8 fully vaccinated guests that is split between 2 tables of 4, do the tables need to remain 6 feet apart? So anytime you have, let me take a step back. Table size in the bridge phase can increase to 10. So if you have a party of 8, you can sit them all at the same table. If you have folks that are fully vaccinated, you can go above that limit of 10, again, provided that you're checking for these vaccination records. Great question here. For an event space with a liquor license, do you now get to follow the liquor license hours? Yes. If you're an event space with a liquor license, you can resume your normal operating hours, going to 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. Our self-serve areas, are self-serve area bars allowable? At this point, we still have self-serve areas closed. So any sort of buffet, things like that, should still be served by the employer or by the employee, not open to self-serve at this point. Great. Please explain 6 feet between parties, referring to different people within the same room or to individuals. Great. So when we say 6 feet between parties, I mean parties that are placed at separate tables or at separate standing areas that are not part of the same group. You need to keep 6 feet between them. What are the restrictions for indoor pools? So indoor pools are limited to 60%. Reservations are not required, but they are encouraged in order to minimize capacity. Great question here about the vaccine exemption. Great. So clarifying point here about capacity being able to increase above 75%. If a business is taking advantage of the vaccine exemption, that does allow them to get above 75%, because patrons that are fully vaccinated do not count towards capacity. So in that scenario, you may have guests, you may have patrons that has both fully vaccinated and not fully vaccinated individuals that combined get you above 75%, because the non-vaccinated individuals do not count towards 75%. Can music venues now reopen as long as they maintain 6 feet of social distancing and keep 60% capacity? Absolutely. Music venues have actually been able to be open for a little bit. We're increasing capacity here. Venues are now at 60% capacity. Great question here about determining whether a vaccine card could be forged. So we know that, this is a very fluid situation when it comes to vaccinations, vaccine cards. It is your responsibility as the business owner to check for proper to verify that someone is actually fully vaccinated. Now, in reality, we know that this is kind of a new item. This is a new thing. We want establishments to certainly do their due diligence. But that isn't something that we're going to be outwardly enforcing and holding the business accountable. We really do want to make sure, though, that you are doing your due diligence, and in egregious cases that there is an opportunity for us to take action. I think I answered this, but just to clarify, you do not need to archive or retain the vaccine documentation in any way if you want to take advantage of the vaccine documentation. All you need to know, and here's a question specific, all you need to do again, and here's a question about this, is ensure that you as the business know and can share with an investigator who is and who is not vaccinated. You can use, per this question here, different color wristbands, things like that. Great question here. Can event venues have a head table with 20 people if all the guests at the table are vaccinated? Yes, absolutely. Again, you can have table size over 10 if all patrons are fully vaccinated. Great question here. This individual owns a boutique fitness studio that can have 28 clients. If they go to 60% capacity, then you can no longer have 6 feet between clients. It's important that you always maintain 6 feet of social distancing, even as we're increasing capacity. So some folks might actually be under this new capacity limit if they can't get to 60% with 6 feet of social distancing. Again, we're really hopeful that we can continue to fully expand over the next couple of weeks or months. The governor has set June 11th as the day for fully reopening. We expect in the city that will be sometime around then. So we do know that, we're going in the right direction and this will be coming soon. At this point, you still need to maintain 6 feet of distancing between clients. Right. So a great question about defining standing areas. If you as a business want to allow standing areas, then you need to kind of have a designated standing area. Again, that can be your bar space, but it needs to be designated as this is a standing area, because you need to ensure that capacity limits are followed within that area. Again, standing areas are limited to 25% capacity, and you're required to make sure that that is being followed. If investigators show up and we see a packed crowd right around the bar and you're not taking advantage of the vaccine exemption, that's going to be a definite concern, because you're limited to 25% capacity in standing areas. Great question here. There's a small event venue that it normally has a capacity of 100. Determined that the current capacity is 80 to ensure 6 feet between tables. Do you need to get to the vaccine exemption in order to get to 80 people? The answer to that question is no. Even without the vaccine exemption, even without using this, social events can operate at 250 people indoors or 500 people outdoors, provided that tables are 6 feet apart. Question here about dancing at weddings. Again, this is something that we look to the state for. We know that we can never be less strict than the state. At this point, the dance floors are still to be closed, even if patrons are fully vaccinated. Again, this is coming from the state. If that changes, we will absolutely share it. Great. What about restaurant limits under the vaccine exemption with both fully vaccinated teens and adults and children under 12? So again, when we're talking table size, if you're a restaurant or any establishment that serves food or drink, table size can go above the limit of 10 if everybody that is 16 or older is fully vaccinated. That means you can have folks under 16 that aren't vaccinated, but everybody that is fully is over the age of 16, 16 or older must be fully vaccinated to go above 10. Great. So can a group of 10 sit and stand around the same table as long as they are 6 feet apart from other group? Absolutely. Again, the table or party size for either standing areas or tables is limited to no more than 10, and you must be 6 feet apart from all other groups. Again, if you're opening standing areas, they must be at 25% capacity. So if you have a cocktail party, for example, and you have folks that are standing around tables, they can be standing around tables in groups of 10 around that table with 6 feet between that group and another group at 25% at 25% occupancy. Question about the 25% capacity limit based on the overall occupancy for the space. Yes, that is based on the overall occupancy for the space. If the total occupancy is 100, then 25 people can be standing in total around tables and around the bar. Great question here about the vaccine exemption and how it applies to conferences, meetings, places like that. Yes, the vaccine exemption applies to all industries. Any industry that wants to take advantage of it can take advantage of it. So you can now go above those capacity limits if you choose to exempt fully vaccinated individuals. The social distancing rules still apply, however. Do vaccinated guests need to wear masks around service staff? At this point, again, all of the same mask rules that we've been following for the last number of months remain in place for now. We will let you know. Again, we're reviewing it our guidelines based on yesterday's announcement. At this point, vaccinated guests still need to wear a mask around service staff. And any time when they're not actively eating or drinking. Are outdoor tables still required to be 6 feet apart? Yes, tables still must be spaced even outdoors so that patrons are 6 feet apart. Question here, can you hold a standard standing cocktail reception? So the answer to that is yes, with some caveats. So you can have a cocktail reception. Again, standing areas can open at 25% capacity, but patrons always need to be standing around tables, and they need to be in groups of 10 or less within that area. And then they also must be 6 feet apart from other guests. So at this point, yes, they can be open, limited to 25% capacity as well. So late hours for applicable establishments. So when the question here is, when do late hours for applicable establishments start? So late hours for late hour establishments start when the normal liquor operating hours end. So typical liquor hours can stay open till 2 a.m. most nights and 3 a.m. Saturday night into Sunday morning. So if you want to open later, again, you can only do so if you have a late hour liquor license, and if you choose to ensure that it's only fully vaccinated customers. Up until that late hour time, you can have non-vaccinated patrons, but at that late hour time, at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Saturday nights, then you are no longer, you have to have fully vaccinated folks. Question here about the vaccine exemption and how it applies to cocktail hours when you have folks that are not vaccinated, for example, kids that are a part of it. So again, Fully vaccinated patrons don't count towards your capacity limits if you choose to take advantage of the vaccine exemption. Standing areas are limited to 25%. That means everybody within a standing area that is fully vaccinated does not count towards that 25%. So you would count, let's say you have a room that usually fits 100. Under the standing area limit, you now can fit 25. Let's say you have 50 individuals that are in there that are fully vaccinated. They don't count towards that 25 limit. Everybody who is not vaccinated, whether they're a kid that can't be vaccinated or an adult that's not vaccinated, counts towards that 25 limit. So you can't have more than 25 people who are not fully vaccinated. And that same applies for then a restaurant that may want to take advantage of the limit. Again, tables still need to be spaced 6 feet apart. Capacity can increase above 75% because people that are fully vaccinated don't count towards that 75%. That means you can have 75% of your normal occupancy of people who are unvaccinated, and everyone else does not count towards that capacity limit. An important point to make, though, you obviously still must follow your posted occupancy and applicable code. You can't go above whatever the standard occupancy is for your building, even if folks for your establishment, even if folks are fully vaccinated. Great. Are masks required for fully vaccinated adults in a fitness group class? Again, at this point, masks are still required in every way that they've been over the last few months. We'll let you know if that changes, but masks are still required for fully vaccinated adults. Can you stand in order from a bar if there is 6 feet from the next person? Yes, absolutely. You can stand in order from a bar if you are 6 feet from any other individuals. Question again about the vaccine exemption. Even if folks are still fully vaccinated, you still at this point need to keep 6 feet between them and others in a fitness class. Question here about dance classes. Are there limits on capacity for fully vaccinated people? Again, fully vaccinated people do not count towards capacity limits at fitness classes, dance classes, at any place else, but masks at this point are still required. Question, how will investigators know if a business is taking advantage of the vaccination exemption? We expect, when investigators show up, that the business should be letting them know right away that they're taking advantage of the vaccine exemption. Okay, I got a lot of questions here about, do fully vaccinated parties still need to be 6 feet apart? Yes, they do under the state regulations at this point. We know that this may change, and we'll let you know if this changes, but that is still at this point. Question about, do you need to hold on to vaccine cards for city regulators? Again, you do not need to hold on to, we don't want you to hold on to a copy of the vaccine card. That is absolutely not a requirement. You are required to check a vaccine card, and then you are required to know who is a part of the vaccine exemption and who is not in your establishment, and then calculate capacity accordingly. You are not expected to maintain that card. Okay. Question here, and this is probably a relevant question for events, conferences, things like that. If a conference wants to take advantage of the vaccine exemption, is it the responsibility of the conference or the venue? So ultimately, we here at BACP we hold the licensed establishment responsible. Now, they can designate that responsibility to the event organizer, the conference planner, whoever it may be. The important thing is that when we arrive, somebody is responsible there, and ultimately it's the responsibility, the licensed establishment is the one that is held responsible ultimately, but they can designate that to somebody on site, to the conference, to the event organizer, things like that. Had a couple questions about when the 6-foot distancing rules, is there expectation that those will be lifted when we get to phase 5? The expectation when we get to phase 5 is that, the vast majority, if not all of these regulations will be lifted at that point. We're hopeful that that's going to be coming soon. We'll definitely share things as we get closer. Great question here. Presenters at a meeting or performers on a stage, can they go unmasked if there's 10 feet between the stage and the first guest or row or table? Absolutely. Performers, speakers, things like that, they can go unmasked provided that they're 10 feet away from other patrons. Question here, are you still limited to 25% capacity in standing areas, even if you follow a vaccine exemption? I know this is, and happy to take emails and walk people through this in email as well. So you're limited to 25% capacity at standing areas in the Chicago, in our bridge phase. But remember, patrons that aren't that are fully vaccinated and you choose to check them, they do not count towards capacity limit. That means when you're counting that 25% capacity, you do not count those folks that are fully vaccinated, which then allows you to go above 25% capacity. Great question here. If you're a hotel that hosts weddings and serves food and beverage at the weddings, which capacity do you fall into? Great question. If you're holding weddings, then you would, any sort of wedding, anything like that, that would fall into the event venues regulations. Right. Question here, packaged liquor sales, they still end at 11 p.m. at this point. Question here about if we expect that this will be changed by Monday. I know I'm getting a lot of questions. When do you expect these new rules will come as they come to masks? I do wish that I could give a more definitive answer at this point. I know that, let me take a step back. In the city, we obviously, as I've said a number of times, we can never be less strict than the state. So we're certainly looking to the state to update their guidelines. So, as the city, I can't tell when exactly that will be. We hope to have updates as soon as possible. I know that's not a great answer. I hope to provide updates as soon as we can, though. And the question there, do you expect to have new updates or changes by the webinar on Monday? I will say that for me personally, I hope to provide, I hope that there will be updates and new changes come Monday. Again, do not know when that will be because we need to look to the state first for something like this. Great question here. Can you follow the regular bridge phase rules one day and take advantage of the vax exemption rules another day? Absolutely. You can choose, for example, to have one table that's taking advantage of the vaccine exemption and the rest of the establishment not doing it. That's really up to your choice. Great question. You say 25% cap for standing area. That's 25% cap of that area itself. So if you have a designated standing area, that area should be 25% of that area. So, if you have, obviously you may not have an occupancy placard, something like that for that area, but you can calculate that based on, dividing that by your full occupancy to determine how many folks can be in that standing area. Great. Question, what is the procedure for increasing indoor social events greater than 250? Do all 250 need proof of vaccination, or only those that represent the number greater than 250? So for example, if you have an event that has 280 guests, so do only 30 need to prove that they're vaccinated? Yes, that is correct. You only need to have 250 people are allowed in an event, whether you're taking advantage of the vaccine exemption or not. That again, 250 people, whether you're taking advantage of it or not. That means if you want to go above 250, you need to at least have that difference show and prove that they're vaccinated. So for example, yes, if you have 280 guests, you only need 30 of them showing that they're fully vaccinated to go above that number. Great. I do see a couple additional questions come in. Some of these are kind of detailed about specific, how to calculate specific capacity, about specific operational questions. For those questions, if you can, I'd ask that you send those via email, again, to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Again, bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Great. A question here about folks eating or drinking in standing areas. Folks, again, if they're eating or drinking in standing areas, they should be doing that eating or drinking around tables. So they should not be walking around while they're doing that eating or drinking. Again, they should be doing this around tables. So again, folks should not be walking around while they're eating or drinking. And I got a couple questions here. I just want to reiterate, even if folks are fully vaccinated at this point, even if everyone in the establishment is fully vaccinated, you still need to maintain 6 feet of social distancing between groups. This is a rule that comes from the state. We can never be less strict than the state. They've had a vaccine exemption for about a month, a little over a month now. And that's been clear in their FAQ and their rules about this vaccine exemption. We can never be less strict than the state. That is something that we certainly would look to follow the state regulations on. But at this point, we can't be, as I said, less strict than the state. Again, I'll stick around, but I ask, if I did not answer your question, please send that question via email, and I'll do my best to answer this. Question here for social events: do vaccine records need to be collected in advance? Can it be done with an attestation submitted by guests prior to the event? So vaccine records do not need to be collected in advance. You certainly can do that. Can it be done with an attestation? So you can do it with some sort of attestation, but establishments should be checking for the records as well. An attestation itself isn't sufficient. You can do that ahead of time, and then maybe you do that ahead of time, have them fill out an attestation, and then they have them bring a photocopy of their card on their way in. Folks should at least be checking. Had some question about new signage for businesses on the vaccine exemption. We are working on additional signage, especially given yesterday's announcement, and we'll make sure to share that. If folks are not on our email list, I assume you all are, for how you attended this, just please make sure, if you want to add anyone else to your email list, please make sure to send us an email to BACP Outreach, and we will get you added to that list. We'll send updates as soon as they're made. Question here about walking around with drinks at festivals. At this point, folks, again, should be eating or drinking at tables or at the bar. Folks should not be walking around with drinks, whether they're at festivals, at restaurants, at events, whatever that is. Great. I know that this is really complicated. I know that there's a lot of new information all at once. Again, I do apologize for all of the new changes, and we will be providing updates as soon as we have them. I also want to point everybody to we have a frequently asked questions document on our reopening website at chicago.gov/reopening. You can find a detailed FAQ there that kind of goes through all of this in even more detail than I just did. And you can find more information there. Again, I want to remind folks, you do not need to retain the vaccination card in any way. That's absolutely not a requirement. But it is, we are expecting establishments to at least verify through a photocopy, through them showing you a vaccine card, something like that. You are expected to verify this, but you're not expected to maintain that information. Great. I want to thank everybody for attending this. Again, I know that this is a lot of new information. We will be sharing information consistently over the next couple weeks and months. We're really excited. I know that this is a lot at once, but it's really good news that we're moving in this direction that we are. Thank you guys for your diligence. Again, we know that some businesses want to take advantage of this vaccine exemption, but we also know that not every business will, and that's totally fine. We also have the option for an active compliance program where we'll actually send some of our investigators out for a non-disciplinary visit to walk you through these regulations, to make sure you know how to follow them and to kind of correct things in a non-disciplinary way. If you're interested in that, send us an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Again, any questions you have, we know that there's a lot of nuance and a lot of complication here. We want to make sure folks are, doing what they need to do to comply, but most importantly, to keep their patrons and their employees safe. I'd be remiss if I didn't end with this. The quickest way we can get back to normal, the quickest way we can get it back to everything we know we love is by getting everyone vaccinated. All Chicagoans 16 plus are eligible. This is actually an old slide. I should have updated this. Now, all patrons 12 or older are now eligible. The appointments are widely available. 312-746-4835 or chicago.gov/vaccine finder. Please check out. We strongly encourage. We want to make sure that folks can quickly get back to normal if people are vaccinated. So thank you all. And again, don't hesitate to send any questions our way. Thank you.